Welcome, everybody, to Wine and, the show where we pair wine with books, comics, music, movies, TV, and maybe one day we'll pair it with, I don't know, food or something normal like that. You never know what the future will bring, but for now, we've got to keep it weird. Most of the time, we're going to be discussing things we love. Sometimes we'll dissect something that we hate, but whatever it is you love, whatever it is you hate, there is a wine that pairs with that. If you like what you hear today and you want to hear more, make sure you hit that follow button and subscribe. It helps the podcast grow. Also, leave a review, 5 stars, no less. You know you love us that much on Apple iTunes or any other platform that allows reviews or scores. I am Dave Baxter, and with me today is my co-host, Dallas Miller.
That's me. What's up, people? This is the first of many. Welcome to Wine and.
Welcome to Wine and with us also today is a very special guest, Justin Decloux.
Hello.
Hello. So Justin is a Canadian filmmaker and podcaster extraordinaire. He has done many podcasts, currently 2 podcasts, but he has done many more than just these 2. But I've been listening to Justin on the Very Fine Comics podcast, where he and his co-host discuss very fine comic books, and on No Such Thing as a Bad Movie, where he and his 2 co-hosts will, I just said that this podcast will sometimes dissect something that we hate, and they regularly dissect things that everybody hates, or at least get a bad rap, and they try to find the good in those movies, if at all possible. Right. Well, on the note of movies that get a bad rap, though, we are here to talk today about the Wachowskis' Speed Racer from 2008.
Yes.
That is a movie that, when it came out, did not great due to its oversized budget, did not do great at the box office. It made $90 million at the box office, but it was $150-ish million, I want to say the budget of that thing was. So it was considered a failure, a bomb. And the reputation, the critics panned it almost across the board. Audiences were not exactly enthralled by it. But recently, this is a movie that has been really gaining in status, cult status, and yes. When I tried to look up anyone writing about this movie from about 2017 to now, so about the last 5 years and change, it's all been, this is one of the most incredible movies. Like, why has no one been talking about this my whole life? And yet, if you go back to 2008, 2009, absolutely nobody is saying anything nice about it. So There has been a sea change in this movie. But let's start out by actually talking about when we first saw Speed Racer and what our history with this movie is leading up to preparing for this podcast. So, Justin, why did you pick this to talk about on this podcast? And what is your history?
This is probably one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. I saw it theatrically at a budget cinema because it had been so panned. Yeah. And I was like, I love this movie. I think I saw it 2 or 3 more times while it was in theaters, bringing my then current girlfriend to see it, probably going to see it on my own. My pal, Peter Kaplowski, it's weird because, like, you're saying everybody's rediscovering it. Like, all me and my friends, we love Speed Racer. He has a story.
You loved it.
He saw the movie, left, and then bought another ticket and went back in when it came out.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
you were those. So the 90 million came from somewhere.
Oh, yeah, your crew. Yeah,
my friend Peter actually did a 70 millimeter film screening of it in the only remaining 70 millimeter print at the Cinesphere in Ontario, which is like a giant IMAX, properly sized IMAX screen near the docks. Like, so we watch it multiple different ways. Like, we have Speed Racer in our blood.
Nice. Amazing. Dallas, what's
for me, I remember what year was this? 2008.
May 2008 was its release.
I remember because I moved to Los Angeles around that time, and I was pretty deeply embedded in sort of the nonsense that was happening in cinema, with all of the comic book sort of translations and whatnot. And I remember so many conversations about this movie and about how it was in production was just a train wreck. And when it came out, I'd been so soured on it that I was like, okay, it's going to be trash. Because honestly, the trailers just did not intrigue me whatsoever. And I finally, went to see it, and I think I walked out.
Wow! Really?
I think I walked out because...
You go right back in because you loved it so much, right?
I think I walked out mostly because it was so
overwhelming?
Not wow, you are definitely
Lead the witness, Justin. Lead the witness.
oh, wow, Justin. It was one of those things where I just sort of it was dissonant. There was this sort of dissonance in the first half, and I just wasn't interested in sitting around to see where it went. I'm the guy who always sits around to see where it goes, but for some reason, maybe I was going through something. I was like, I'm checking out of this, and I have to say, in rewatching it, that was a fucking mistake in a way that I am a little reticent and hesitant to kind of admit.
We appreciate your honesty.
I have to say, like this thing, after rewatching it recently, has shot back up, and I would say in my top 10, it is easily one of the greatest testaments to green screen animation.
Absolutely, I would agree. Yeah,
of all time.
Yeah.
Period.
When you think of green screen, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, you think of a very flat,
yes,
like Tim and Eric kind of non-reality.
Yes,
and Speed Racer just figured it out, and they were able to execute it in a way that feels dynamic and doing different things with it, to the point that you don't even think about it being on green screen anymore.
Yeah, precisely. It's like on my eyes, and this is 2008, so this isn't like deep into the sort of the green.
We're still thinking of Pierce Brosnan, like I guess he's surfing on the icing.
Right. And it's so seamless. So yeah, this is one of those occasions where, and I'd been familiar with the animation and all that stuff in the early IP, but this is one of those occasions where I distinctly remember walking out, and I think Dave, you and I even had a few conversations about the Speed Racer IP when after a couple of years after it was released, because of the company, because the work we were doing at the time, and I believe we had done some work with someone on the creative team, and I can't remember who it is now. So, Anyway, that's how.
Did you guys have any familiarity or nostalgia for the license of Speed Racer? Because I didn't have any as a kid.
None. It was one of those. It was one of those. Those sort of. It came on Saturday morning sometimes where I lived, and also in the evenings, and it was so antiquated for me at that time that it just didn't ring any bells. It was like the comic, my older sisters and cousins enjoyed, and it was timely then. And so I had no connection to it. It seemed just dated and silly.
Yeah.
How
about you, Dave?
So,
when did you see the movie?
So I cannot remember the exact year that I saw the movie anymore for the first time, but it was not in the theaters. I missed it in 2008. 2008 was, I'm assuming this was when I moved from East Coast to West Coast. So I moved from New York to LA. My life was wildly tumultuous. I was broke ass. I was, I was funding the move, buying getting into a new apartment, didn't have job prospects in LA for the first 6 months I was here. So I think that year, if I saw anything in the theater in 2008, it would have been in the dollar theater. It would have been or someone paid my way. Like, I was very not in theaters in 2008. So, but I do remember, knowing about Speed Racer, I was so with the Wachowskis at this time. I loved The Matrix. I think I liked the sequels to The Matrix, the full trilogy, more than most at the time.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I had reservations about the sequels where I was like, and I'm going to talk more about this, about what Speed Racer does with a lot of these themes, because I think I was not connecting to these themes. I didn't understand what they were doing and why they were doing it. As a cis white male, it just wasn't in my vocabulary or in my experience. So there was nothing as subtext. I couldn't connect to a lot of their identity themes because I didn't suffer them. I didn't struggle through them. So I'm just like, there's nothing there for me to connect to. So until they got a little more transparent with it, and I think it was Sense8, the TV show or the Netflix show, that's when I was like, oh, I get it. I get all of it, and I love this. But until they were much more
overt,
like text rather than subtext, that's when I started. And then going back through their stuff, I started to really get what they were doing with it, and also reading up what other people had written about them and their work. But at the time, Speed Racer, I will say this. I know the trailer did not intrigue me. I had seen the trailer. I will even say that when I did see Speed Racer for the first time, I loved it. I can't remember when. I think it was on streaming of some kind. So it was a few years into the streaming. So after 2010. So 2010 to 2012 is my guess. Somewhere in there when it hit Netflix, or, it was a movie not a lot of people cared about at that point in time. So I think it fell on the streaming services pretty quickly. I got to watch it for free on one of them. Or maybe it was like DVD disc in the mail, Netflix. It could have been that too. I honestly just simply do not remember. But what I do remember is I had zero expectations. The word of mouth had been terrible for the movie. None of my friends talked highly of it. No one had talked highly of it. So when I finally sat down and watched it, I was a blank slate on it, and it just blew me away. Everything about it works on every level in ways that it is hard to put your finger on as to why these things are all gelling.
None of it should work.
Yeah, like you watch the movie and like I tear up at the end, and when you take a step back, and you're like, "What are you tearing up at?" It's like because they get to express themselves artistically in a way that matters, and their family is behind them.
You know what's crazy? Here's what's crazy, Justin. As I because I rewatched it again tonight, today, and I watched it, the first time when I knew we were going to do this a couple of days ago, and I was sitting on this couch, a 6'7" tall man. I'm not really.
That's what you look like. The camera's at a low angle as I'm looking at you here.
You could say you're whatever.
With other objects to make sure.
And this is audio only, so paint a picture verbally for the audience.
But it was one of those moments. And I'm a heartless bastard when it comes to entertainment. Like, I really teared up, metaphorically speaking. Tears.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments when I was like, wait, why the fuck does this inspire emotion? This should not inspire emotion at all at this moment, because there's a part of my brain which is also saying this is so manipulative and so cheesy. There is that part of it, because it's just that's the nature of this IP. It's so comic and so sort of digitally sort of rendered that it's obvious manipulation. But I think what they managed to do is just strike at some core concepts with some really satisfying visuals, and it just comes together in this seamless kind of supernova that leaves you really connected and in the world. So
I think what's amazing and depressing about Speed Racer is that it's a giant budget movie about how you can artistically express yourself in a system that just wants to destroy you.
What's
depressing about it is that they failed. They basically did not achieve what Speed Racer.
What's crazy is that message is so heavy-handed, and not artistically heavy-handed, I should say. Like, it's so clear. It's like corporations are bad, sponsorship, blah blah blah, and it's like, okay, all right, guys. But
in
by
a very
the end, you're
nitty-gritty way. Yeah, I think is maybe overcomplicated, but they literally explain how the stock market is manipulated for children.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, because what matters is whoever makes the most money.
Right. That's the goal. It's just it's magically insane, which I've been described as magically insane before. So I get it.
There you go. So maybe you just felt competitive against the movie the first time you saw it.
That's probably it. I have
you're like, I can't express myself this way. I'm out of here.
It's all right. I needed a decade to work some shit out before.
Yeah, you were like the villain of the film. You're like, you just don't understand how the world works, Speed Racer.
Right.
Now, I will say, even watching the trailer before watching it now to prepare for this podcast, the trailer turned me off from this movie.
I don't know what happened with the trailer.
Well, here's the thing that I think is extra interesting. I don't think it was marketing's fault, like it is in most cases when the trailer is like selling you incorrectly on the movie. Like, they don't know what to do with this weird ass unique movie, so they do. It's like they're showing the movie as it is, but the visuals require you to see it in context of what they're doing with them. And when you chop it up into these brief second to half second moments that you're just cobbling together into a 2-minute trailer, it looked weirdly cheap and kind of like gaudy. And
I think what the trailer's missing is the Michael Giacchino score, and because it's like it's very electric music, and because like the movie is all about like all the pieces working in sync with each other, because there's so
Right.
much shifting to like
Yes.
this is the present, no, it's a flashback, and everything is commenting on everything else,
Yes.
and the trailer can't do that. So like you said, it's just like, aren't these images wacky and cool, but like
Yeah.
out of
Right.
context, it doesn't mean
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything, and they were doing a lot with digital editing, which at the time was still pretty new.
Early
There
days,
wasn't
yeah.
a lot of digital editing happening then, or people were still editing with digital editing like they had film. Like people were sticking to the tried and true techniques. And so I know that they're on record as saying one of the things they wanted to do with this movie was really push the envelope on that and do things with digital editing that you could never do if you were actually putting pieces of film together. And now you could have multiple things happening on screen at once, which is one of those things where I'm like, oh, right, we didn't have that happening before.
Yeah.
Like that is a new thing. I forget that is, because it's such a staple of filmmaking now.
And now that you mention that, I do recall, and I don't remember if I was at one of the cons or some panel, but someone on the team or associated with the team, may have been one of the Wachowskis.
Cha-cha-cha.
Right. I always say Wachowski.
Yeah, I always say Wachowski too.
Yeah,
Wachowski.
I'm pretty sure it's Wachowski,
I've heard
but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No. You do not come to me for pronunciation guides.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's like this. I go, oh yeah, you're probably right.
but I seem to recall there being some sort of battle over the trailers before the rollout with the directors and the production team and the studio. I remember there being some serious conversation, some battle. It may have been even a legal thing over the trailer rollout. And I feel like they ended up making their own trailers for the film. That's all me in sort of just reflection of a brain that's been marred by lots of wine over the years. So
I do think that the Wachowskis were so specific with the editing of the film. They were trying to weave things together in very particular ways that when you chop it up and reassemble it in different ways, it kind of, and you have to in a trailer in a way, unless you just show a clip from the movie, which maybe that's what they should have done. You know, I feel like things are just sort of fall apart with this style that they were going for because it was so specific in how it was woven together. Let's actually back up and because what the Wachowskis were trying to do with this movie, I think, is a very important part of talking about this and how ahead of its time it actually was. So let's talk the Wachowskis. We know, so a lot of people don't forget that they didn't start as screenwriters and filmmakers. They actually got their start in comic books. They did that before they got to write any, or they were writing their first screenplays concomitantly with writing their first comic book work. Larry Wachowski, now Lana Wachowski, is the only credited writer on all of these comics, but they are on record as saying they wrote everything together, even these comics. Although due to certain legal issues, they could not tell Marvel that when they were writing these comics. So Andy would never get credit on these comics. They just kept it hush hush and just wrote together anyways. And Lana was the one who was technically hired to do these. And they wrote for the Clive Barker Hellraiser anthology from the Epic line, which was basically Marvel's adult line of comics, kind of their Vertigo. They did not last as long as Vertigo. Vertigo really took off. Epic folded relatively quickly. But these were kind of big for the time. And then Clive Barker launched a superhero line of comics with Marvel called the Razorline Universe. And they wrote Ecto Kid for that line together. And that is, if no one's ever read Razorline, it is, you know,
I've never even heard of Razorline before.
You've never heard of Razorline?
No.
Oh my. Okay, so a very fine comic book podcast. Or the very fine comic book podcast. You got to do the Razorline universe. There were about 4 or 5 titles. Ecto Kid is one of them. Ecto Kid was like the Spider-Man of the universe. It was this teenage kid in New York that wore an eye patch over his left eye. And if he raised it, he could see the demon spirit world with that one eye and interact with it and do very Clive Barker-y things. Oh, and they worked with, Ecto Kid was drawn by Steve Skroce.
I love Steve Skroce.
Yeah, went on to be one of the main storyboard artists of The Matrix when they were vying to get the director's gig for their own screenplay. The Matrix was going to cost a lot of money. So Joel Silver was like, let's do an audition. Why don't you take this other screenplay of yours, Bound, and I can get you the money for the small amount of money for that. You can direct that as your calling card. They did. It did well. And that did, now they still had to make that storyboard that we talked about with Steve Scroce and Jeff Darrow. They made a 600-page storyboard of The Matrix to convince the executives to give them the directing gig there. They did get it. However, one fun fact about this, because I love this, because Joel Silver has he changes his story on this. The Wachowskis are infamous for not giving a lot of press. They don't give a lot of interviews. They don't talk a lot. They're very private people. So Joel Silver talks on their behalf a lot. And I get the feeling he makes up a lot of things. This, I believe the Wachowskis and Keanu Reeves both have confirmed that Larry and Andy Wachowski were pitching The Matrix to their producers. They played them the DVD of the 82-minute Japanese cartoon Ghost in the Shell, and said, we want to do that for real. And fun fact about Keanu, the studio cast him before the Wachowskis were on board. So that was not their decision, and they were baffled by the decision originally. They were, just like all of us, they were like, the Bill and Ted guy? They're like, how? Okay, but the studio was like, if you want to do this movie, he's your lead. And they did not have a choice. Now, it turned out to be amazing, and they loved each other and wanted to work together forever. But they made him watch Ghost in the Shell and Akira. So those were the two anime movies that Keanu was forced to watch, and got him into anime. Now Keanu's into comics, and he's making his own comics as well, and so on and so forth. But I wanted to point that out because by the time we get to Speed Racer, Joel Silver says he showed the Wachowskis the Speed Racer anime, and that it was the first anime the Wachowskis had ever seen.
That is absolutely incorrect. Joel Silver's so full of shit. You watch like Matrix Reloaded, and is it Revolutions, the third one?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's funny that like any problem that I probably had when I actually really liked Matrix Reloaded when it came out. But like, I don't even think I was conscious enough to realize that they're basically making movies that are going against what everybody liked in the first one. They're like, the chosen one doesn't matter. Like, that doesn't mean anything. He can do anything. But in the context of this, it doesn't, like, that's why the Burly Brawl, people are like, oh, it's so unconclusive. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. Like, he's fighting just to fight. That's why he just flies away at the end.
Right.
And the studio wanted them to just rehash the first one.
Oh,
They were very upset that they did an anti-Matrix for their Matrix sequels. I can't even imagine what they fucking thought of the fourth one. I mean, the fact that it happened at all.
What they think of the fourth
stunning.
one? Michael B. Jordan is going to be starring in a new reboot starring.
Right. That's what they thought of the fourth one. They're like, okay, we gave you your chance. That was cute. Now we're doing it for real. And making our Matrix game. The development hell of Speed Racer at Warner Brothers.
How far are we going back? We're going back to Patrick Reed Johnson supposed to direct.
No.
Oh God!
Just to Julian Temple. We'll just go to Julian Temple.
Just the Temple.
The thing that I love about Warner Brothers handling Speed Racer is that they were like, it's going to be a kids movie. It's going to be amazing, based on this really popular Japanese animation. And their list of directors they kept hiring are like the farthest thing from a kids movie director you could possibly find. It starts with Julian Temple, the director of Absolute Beginners, the British musical based on a British literary work that bombed in Britain, to the point where Julian Temple left Britain and moved to the States and was like, yeah, my career's over here. Let's just go to America. And so they're like, great, here's Speed Racer. Johnny Depp was attached as Speed Racer at the time. And
Henry Rollins
as Racer X.
Really?
Yeah.
He was actually technically the first actor offer, I believe.
Yes, he was. And then Johnny Depp, and then weirdly, I do not pretend to understand this. I feel like this was the shittiest thing on Johnny Depp's part, but maybe this was reported in a funky way. Johnny Depp asked for time to take care of some personal issues, so they stalled production. And he took so long, Julian Temple left and had to leave as the director. Then Johnny Depp came back and was like, oh, there's no director. I'm out too. And left for good. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, okay, that was either really shitty or that's a weird, like something else was going on there. And that
actually happens more often than not.
Exactly. But that all fell through. And then they went to Gus Van Sant, which I'm just like, I'm sorry. What are you doing, Warner Brothers?
You got to imagine what that film would look like, first of all.
I mean, the studios love doing that. If someone has an art house hit, they're like,
yes.
oh, man, City of Lost Children. That guy should direct Alien Resurrection, and
Right.
the director's even like, why? I guess, sure.
Right. He's like, but I'm doing my version of Alien
Yeah.
Resurrection. They're like, please do.
They're like,
and then they
okay,
see it,
sure.
and they're like, wait,
Not
this is
that.
fucking weird like your last movie. And he's like,
Yeah.
yes, which is actually, he's going to bring us to the Wachowskis on Speed Racer. The studio had the exact same response. But before that, we also still had to go through, it was Gus Van Sant, and Alfonso Cuarón was their next hire for a very brief moment of time. Vince Vaughn was attached as Racer X for a short, brief moment as well. I can kind of see that. I can kind of see that. This was in his younger days.
I have to say, like, none of these versions would have interested me because I don't really care
Not
about
as much.
Speed Racer. So it's all about what the Wachowskis bring to
Exactly.
it.
Right.
Exactly.
And then they go to the Wachowskis. They were looking for their next big thing. They had done the Matrix. The Matrices, if that's how you say that, were the sequels were they did well, but they were still considered a disappointment, quote unquote, because they wanted them to do even more. And V for Vendetta did okay, but was also a bit of a disappointment because, again, everyone wanted the first Matrix and wanted it to just be like a cultural event, and none of these films quite were. But for whatever reason, Warner Brothers was like, yes, okay, the Wachowskis, this could be, they're going to do an all ages film. And the Wachowskis were like, okay, sure.
Have you met her?
Yes. So here's a quote from Lana Wachowski. Warner Brothers was at first gleeful that we were like doing a known entity that seemed like a family movie for kids. And then we started showing stuff and they were like, oh my God. We were interested in Cubism and Liechtenstein and pop art, and we wanted to bring all of that stuff into a cinema aesthetic. They were like, oh my God, are you insane? What are you doing? This is the weirdest thing we've ever seen. And we were like, yes, that's the reason we're making it.
I think that they just wanted, or were expecting, studio executives, because they're dumb, that the movie would look like The Matrix. It's like, oh, it'll look like The Matrix, right? It'll be slick and smooth, and then they give them like a super colorful, like
so kinetic and just so
super
crazy.
kinetic. They're like, whoa, no, wait, your last thing didn't look like this. Why does this one look like this?
Right.
But in reality, what they did with Speed Racer aligns more with the sort of general audience's kids' aesthetic than Matrix would ever.
Yeah.
You know,
I do think they wanted it more colorful. I don't think they wanted it as dark, grim, and gritty as The Matrix, but they were expecting thrills and action that would be a more mainstream, more like now things we already understand and can gobble up without thinking about. And Speed Racer is anything but. The moment this fucking thing starts, the opening sequence, which runs for, I don't know, 15 minutes or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And it is a hodgepodge of so many new ideas visually and ways they're cutting together the past, the present, and just like putting it all together, giving you an onslaught of information.
I mean, Iron Man was what, 4 years before this?
No, it was the same year, wasn't it? I think Iron Man came out in 2008. Yeah.
2008. Yep.
That was the first. Yep. Yeah, I guess you're right. So yeah, we we had been slapped around by this level of,
everybody was loving Iron Man. It's like, finally comic books are on the screen in a bloated, not really. And then Speed Racer is the opposite. It's like very tight, very complicated,
but
like,
also so comic in
comic booky.
Just to wrap your head around like the beginning, where it's giving you all this information about like him as a kid is intercutting with the race, and then his brother who passed away is the ghost on the track that he's racing.
Yeah,
like that was the climax of any other movie.
And see, this is part of this is and to what you're saying, David. This is part of my theory. Is the reason it didn't do as well is because that first 15 minutes is doing the lion's share of onboarding into this world, right? You've got this sort of dual narrative of the kid and his brother going on at the same time. And in 2008, that was just a lot for general fucking audiences to kind of keep up with. So yeah, no, I get it. It definitely fell on deaf ears at the time. So,
well, and to that point, they were even doing things like, as you said, with the ghost of the brother on the track, like his car would speed. Like sometimes the car was the brother in the past. Sometimes he would drive into that car and then become him again and keep going. And the Wachowskis are on record as saying like they were trying to do a 360 storytelling. Whereas, in The Matrix, they created like bullet time where you visually could spin 360 around an object in the film. But this time they're like, now we're narratively like spinning 360 around plot points and around the narrative itself. And it is something where it's just, the thought of that, like when they said that on paper, I'm like, I don't know if I could even picture what that means. And then I watched the movie and I'm like, oh, just that opening, you're like, I get it.
It's right there.
Awesome.
Characters are also spinning 360 transitions and scenes.
Right.
Yes. It's truly masterful. Like, it is just a stroke of absolute genius.
And it's wild that they did Speed Racer and they never really did that again. They're like, we did that. We're not going back to that style.
Which is why I love them so much, because that's who I am as a creator. I'm like, I did that. Fuck off. You know, like.
And they got, I don't know if I don't want to say they get bored easy. That's kind of the mean way of saying it, but it's just like they have done that. They've accomplished it. Yeah. What the world thinks of it is not entirely their problem. They care. Yes. Everyone cares, but they don't care. Like, they're like, okay.
They also seem to follow inspiration. You know,
right? It's like, we're proud of it. We're sorry that you don't see what we see, but moving on. Now let's see what we're going to do next. But why would they? In the same way, they couldn't even do one Matrix sequel that is the same as the first. Like, this is who they are. You know, like, they are very, as creators, they cannot sit in that same place. And it's interesting, speaking of the technology, so the stunt team on Speed Racer, and this was part of the stunt team of The Matrix as well, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, who of course are the co-directors now of the first John Wick. Stahelski went on to direct all the sequels of John Wick, and Leitch went on to do like Atomic Blonde and Deadpool and so on and so forth. So they're stunt people that have made it big and really brought stunt work and even beyond The Matrix into Hollywood proper. But they worked on Speed Racer, and even they were like, it was like being in film school all over again. Like, they were learning new things and new ways of doing things every day. And here's a quote from Leitch. He says, the creating of the environments, here's that green screen thing we were talking about earlier and how interesting it was here. The creating of the environments, the worlds that they were in, what they were doing were these camera arrays, which now everybody uses. Fast and Furious uses this all the time now. You go and shoot an array of an environment, like you light our set. They would do this. They would do that and create a two-dimensional layer so that you could basically put a camera everywhere, and you had this, what we called a bubble of a world. So they sent that effect. So they would send all these different effects units around the world to get all of these different environments and shooting these arrays. This was really before anyone else was using the technology that way. There were so many inventive things that came out of that process. The film has a curious visual language in which elements are layered on top of each other, all in focus, creating a hyper surreal look that mimics the anime it comes from. 4 units would be shooting simultaneously, and every scene needed to be covered by all 4 to achieve every single layer. The Wachowskis covered the actors in the first unit. The second unit was used on cars. Stahelski and Leitch covered the third stunt-focused unit, and the visual effects team headed the 4th unit. Put them all together, and that's one hell of a unique-looking picture.
It is. And you can see it. Like, the idea that they spent time... You know, there's a great scene when he's in the car and he's doing what's called when they spin out, the spinning out. But spinning, I think it's called, I was like, I was making things more complicated than they should be. But the audience is right through the window. And there's an image where you can actually see one of the people in the audiences in their faces, and you can see them sort of blink. And I was like, holy fuck, that's fantastic. Because everything is in focus. So no matter where your eye looks, there's no pull of focus. Everything's in
and that
focus.
Might have been part of that uncanny valley issue that audiences had at the time with looking at this technology, looking at the visuals and the look of the film, and just being like there was an element of overall audience rejection of it.
I wonder, like, you mentioned that you were hearing people thought it was a train wreck. Like, were the Wachowski sisters having difficulty kind of communicating their vision to people of what they were trying to do? Because you hear these productions that people are on set like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
I think that might be part of it, because they're such a tight team. Yeah. And they're they've stated it very often that they're visually stimulated. They tell stories visually. And I think that that may be part of it being.
And to be fair, I think they're smart about this. I think their experience on previous films, when their scripts were rewritten, and whatnot. If you don't want everything to be changed, of course you don't tell the studio. You don't show the footage. They're going to be like, not this, anything but this. Now we've got an executive on set with you, like
It's
watching
not ready yet.
everything you're doing. Right. Of course you don't show
Oh,
them
can
to
we
the
see
end,
a
'cause
work
then they're
print just to
limited.
see where you're going?
Right.
And we know it's a work
Right.
print.
Like,
No one have any
computer's
notes
down,
based
sorry.
on missing effects or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Hires.
Right. But that said, I will say the same thing happened to Spider-Man across. What was the first one? Into the Spider-Verse, right? Where even within Sony Animation, the departments within Sony Animation that were not working on that particular project, the whispers were it was a train wreck, that it was the ugliest animation they'd ever seen, that it was going to bomb horribly. And
I mean, the way that Phil Lord and Chris Miller work, like, clearly the end result is amazing. I love it so much. Like, Into the Spider-Verse, 5-star movie for me.
Trust the process.
But boy, it sure chews up and spits people out. Like that report that came out about Into the Spider-Verse 2 or Across the Spider-Verse, where people are like, I spent 8 months doing animation. They just threw out because they just demand full animation. Go, nah, I don't like that, and then move on. That is kind of like, just make decisions, guys, please. I mean, that's what got them fired.
I mean, that's also the studio model itself. There's such insane turnover, which is a data point I wanted to check out before we started this conversation. I didn't. I wanted to know what the studio situation and repositioning and orchestration was over the course of this of the Wachowskis' production, because that adds a lot of time, sometimes a lot of new interest, a lot of new, like you said, people come in and they decide to just clear the slate in certain departments. So generally when I'm discussing films like this, I like to know what the studio kind of structure was at the time.
Well, you watch Speed Racer and you don't feel that there was a studio head that went, all right, we need to retool this. Like, no, it was such a kind of like Jenga tower that you're like, one piece, you're going to take it out, it's going to collapse all over the place.
Right.
And like everybody was like, I guess we trust them. The Matrix movies make money. Like, we're going to put this out.
At the very least, if it bombs, it's going to bomb gloriously and we can write it against our year slate stuff.
Right. But yeah, I think with something that looks because the technology was so new and it looks so interesting, I think there's also that fear of once they started to see footage, they don't know what to do with that footage. It's like, how are they going to retool it? No one else knew why does this footage even exist? Like, I don't think anyone else could decipher that except the Wachowskis themselves. Which, again, I don't know how conscious any of that might have been on the Wachowskis' part to always make these movies where it's like, okay, here's the footage, good luck, and they're like, no, come back.
Yeah.
Please put this together in something semi-cohesive, semi-coherent. But I was.
Do they work with the same editor, by the way?
On every movie? I don't know. That is a good question. Look up the Speed Racer editor on that. I do know when we were talking about the auteur era before, and about things like Apocalypse Now and Heaven's Gate being a big one, where kind of like you were saying with the animation, where they threw out 8 months work of animation. And that's what bloated the Heaven's Gate thing too, is just like taking forever to just like, I want the perfect shot. We're just going to do this until it's done right. It doesn't matter how many people I abuse, doesn't matter how much money I blow through, doesn't matter how long we're here, doesn't matter how many laws we break. We're just sticking it out until we get it. And it was, I mean, that's the movie that, of course, is most gets the credit for ending the auteur era because of how much it overstepped all its bounds. So I do think when visionaries get the power again, on the one hand, that can be amazing. We get much better product. We get things that are actual art and are a true blue vision that can only come from that particular person, that particular voice. But we always have to be careful about the abuse of labor and things like that, where it's like, okay, but your vision. And I think that's the thing. The Wachowskis always seem to be really like ethical people when it comes to things like that. People like to work with them again and again and again for a reason. That's not the part they're going to blow up in order to get their vision out there. They're going to blow up other bullshit, but they will treat people well and treat them like human beings. And as long as we're doing that, please God, let's get the visionaries out there. But we always got to be careful of how much power we give any people.
What's interesting about the process, though, is that the Wachowskis have talked about that their process is completely different than it was when they made Speed Racer and The Matrix, where they basically would hermetically seal their movies, where every decision would have to be made advance. And now they're not like, it's not chewing up staff, but it's just doing it in the moment. Like that's why Matrix, the newest one, is the way that it is, because they're like, we don't want to choreograph everything or storyboard everything. Rather,
it's going to be organic.
It's its own thing.
Yeah. Okay, Speed Racer. We've talked a lot about it in broad strokes. So do you guys have a favorite moment in this movie? Like what is when you think of Speed Racer, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
The climax, like I said, it's just like all of those elements working together, building up everything come before. That like just sings with me. It's a movie that it's tough to talk about favorite moments because it's so kind of playing. Yeah, like you could almost cut it off into episodes where like everything is kind of intermingling, because there's like the opening, and then they go to the house, and then they go to the factory, and then there's like the race where you see like the end of the race, but then you see the middle of the race, and then you see like a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, I think they do an amazing, just across the board, amazing job of emotional inertia. It just, by the end of this orchestration, it pulls some emotion from you. It just does. And that is actually very difficult to do, or it's really easy to do if you know the fuck you're doing. And they clearly do. And I guess for me, that moment was, it's stupid and so silly. And I hate myself for enjoying it as much as I did.
I'm leaning in. Is it the monkey? Do you love the monkey?
It's the milk, when he gives the milk, the jar of milk to the mechanic.
So good.
I was like, ugh, God, I hate you for making me enjoy this. Ugh. It was one, but that was it. That was the moment for me.
Interesting.
Like, okay.
Oh, see, okay. I have a huge knee-jerk reaction to milk. Just milk on its own. I love dairy products, but milk I think is so nasty as just milk.
I don't like milk. No, I can't drink.
And every time someone does something with milk on screen, it has to like pour all over them. Or things like, I'm just like, I can't watch this. It's like I cannot watch milk spilling and like pouring over someone. It's but
I also have to say, the actor who plays
he's Australian.
He's no, I mean the British actor who plays, I'm going to forget his name, the old the corporate, the CEO.
He's good.
He's good.
I will find him real quick. Hold on.
He's fantastic.
He is
he's a British actor, and I can't remember his name.
Royalton is his name. Roger Allam.
There we are. That's it.
There you go.
He's just, every time he was on screen, I was like, okay, buddy, all right, you're earning your keep today for sure.
Well, how do you feel about everyone's performance in the movies? Because there's an argument to be like they're playing at a very like particular level. Like Matthew Fox,
right?
His kind of acting, it almost feels like he's dubbed in the movie.
I think all the line deliveries were like they were dubbing an anime.
Especially Emil Hirsch.
Oh God, yeah.
Because you're like, I'm just matching the thing to do like that. And
I wonder if they were giving them line readings.
I think so.
But it's perfect.
So.
Yeah, but it's
and
perfect for
what's her name? I always call her Big Eyes. What's her name? Christina Ricci.
Christina Ricci.
She's so perfect in that role. She's so.
She didn't have to digitally make her eyes bigger.
Nothing. Right. She's perfect in that role.
My favorite, it's interesting. I actually like the middle race more than the climax. When that middle race was over, I was just like, I kind of just want to stop the movie. I'm like, that was just pitch perfection. I think there's so much more going on in that race, which is why I like it so much better. There's more players. There's more of a dynamic of like how they're accomplishing what they're accomplishing and how they
it's the highlight race where like you're following everything. So you are waiting for like, what is that bird with the hologram going to show up that they showed us in the intro where they're like, here's everything that's on the car, a bird with a hologram. It's like, oh, can't wait to see that. Never happens in the movie.
Yes. Fun fact about one thing about Speed Racer that I didn't really realize, it is much bigger as an anime than a manga. So it really, even though it was a comic book originally, like that was never the thing that made it big. The manga ran 2 years in Japan, I think, something like that. And then the anime is what has been, and then cartoon after cartoon after cartoon. They just keep going back to the trough. And it's really the anime that is the big point of Speed Racer. And it's called Mach Go 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 in Japan. It's not called Speed Racer, right? And the guy who named the car the Mach 5 in the English translation didn't even realize, he just named it that way because it had the M and the number 5 on it. And he didn't even realize that go meant 5 in Japanese. So it was Mach 555. And that's where Go Speed Racer Go in the theme song came from. And I don't know. I thought that was a funny comedy of errors that was awesome. Like everything worked out, even though no one really knew what they were doing when they were putting that stuff together. But yeah, I think the middle part. And the one other thing that was a great moment for me, I did love one line in the movie. Oh, and the Nanja fight. Shout out to the Nanja fight. That has to get a little bit. That is a great one. I don't know if either of you two have ever seen this not very good Josh Hartnett movie called Bunraku.
I
from
have.
the OO.
Yeah. God,
yeah.
I saw the world premiere of that movie, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so excited!" My favorite action choreography. J.J. Perry's working on the movie. I'm sure it's gonna be great. And I literally sat there like Homer Simpson, being like, "Hey, this can still be good, right? It's just a little boring. It's just a little boring. It's still good. It's still good." Oh, so that's a fascinating movie that kind of looks and feels like Speed Racer, but like does everything wrong.
Yes. Exactly. So when I saw the clips of the Nanja fight in the trailer, I got like flashbacks to Bunraku trauma, where I was just like, I'm like, no, this is everything. Again, this movie is going to do it wrong. And then it does everything right. And even that Nanja fight, I was like, this is fantastic.
Yeah,
and one line, I do want to shout out one line. There's one line that is perfect, the epitome of the Wachowskis and who they are as creators and who they are as people and what Speed Racer is all about. And it is that line where someone tells Speed, I think it's John Goodman, I think it's his dad, and he says, you don't do it to be a driver, you do it because you're driven.
Yeah.
No, that's
his mom.
That's X. No.
It's X when he pulls.
It's X. It's X. Yeah,
you're right.
It's X.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect line because it's like you don't make movies, you're not a creator, you're not, or whoever you are, you're not trying to be that thing. You are that thing. Everything else is just how do you express it to the world, right? But it's like you are that thing. That's why you do it.
Speaking of that line, that is the reason, because it's so fucking manipulative on their part. That line comes right at about 4 minutes till the end of the film. Right around the climax, right? It's right when he's
no, it's middle. It's
no, he does it. He says it twice.
The first time is when
it's a flashback. It's a flashback
exactly,
right at the end. Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
So when they flash back to that, honestly, it was like the 14-year-old boy in me was sitting up in the seat, and this film was made for him and his self-doubt and his, superiority complex and and his inability to kind of surmount his own personal demons and win the personal race. And this character, as Hex says this, X says this, as Speed is about to win this fucking race. That's the thing. That moment slapped my 14-year-old self and said, "Cry now, you little bitch. This is for you."
Yeah.
And it was that moment I was like, oh, this is so manipulative on their part. How dare they? How dare they? But yeah, great.
What other movie can you guys think of takes like something like sports, driving, and makes it an expression of art and wanting to do it from an independent perspective?
I offhand, I honestly,
like, I can't think of anything that
other than, and this is going to sound crazy, other than
come on, say it. Don't leave us on our toes.
What's the Sylvester Stallone film that stars John Travolta?
Staying Alive.
Staying Alive.
That's a fun movie. I like Staying Alive.
Staying Alive.
It's a fun movie.
It's fun, but it's also so effective. And by the end,
Travolta's such a jerk in that movie. But you're right.
Yes.
At the end, you are invested in that final
dance.
When he's like, jump, and you're like, do I think she's not going to make the jump? They've rehearsed
precisely. It's this. I had a similar reaction, similar sort of response to that film. It was like, wait, why? Why am I? What is happening that I'm invested in this ridiculous moment? And it's a very similar thing where it just out of the blue, I'm like, oh, all things kind of come together in this weird way. And it just launches you into this character and sort of empathy, I suppose, for this character. But very similar thing for me.
Interesting. I can't think of anything sports wise or competitive anything. I'm even trying to think like poker, cards, gambling, anything. And not really, not to this level. The only movie when I was watching Speed Racer, one of the only other movies that I can think of that I feel like was equally misunderstood for similar reasons was it's this you might be familiar with this, Justin. It was a Joseph Kahn movie called Detention.
I really love
which,
Detention. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And I think it's a movie where, like Speed Racer, it's very frenetic. It's got this frantic energy and it's throwing shit at you left and right, like at a speed where it's not slowing down. It does not care whether you're keeping up with it or not. It's just going. But it is so fine tuned. There is so much it's doing. Every time I watch it, like every time I watch Speed Racer, there's more to pick up on. And it makes it even better. Like it makes it more of a piece.
Yeah.
And most people reject, I think, both movies because, again, that frantic energy usually is our clue that the movie's dumb and it doesn't trust us as an audience to have an attention span. And it's just trying to do things really quick to keep our attention, even though none of it means anything. And those are two movies I think of often where I'm like, it's frantic in a way that denies why movies are usually frantic, like for the exact opposite reason. And I wish more people could sit and get through that opening in Speed Racer, and like that when it's too much, it's so much coming at you so fast in new ways. And same thing with Detention. I feel like after about 10 minutes in Detention, people are like, oh, this is like, I can't watch the rest. Like, I'm already annoyed with this movie. I have to turn it off.
Kahn attached to Speed Racer at one point? It feels like
I don't
he may have been.
It feels like it, but I could find no evidence of that.
Okay.
If they ever talked to him about it, there's no evidence because Torque was at. What was Torque? 2006 or was it after?
Let's see what Joseph Kahn is up to now on his Twitter. Oh no! If you like his movies, I would not look. I think he protected his tweets actually, because.
Oh, okay. Oh no, has he been saying a lot of incendiary, like problematical things lately?
Yeah, in like very odd ways. He has a real. He hates pit bull dogs. Like, and he's constantly retweeting pit bull dogs attacking people. Like, look, they're dangerous. No. And there was some kind of. Anyway, he has a new movie coming out, and because he funded it himself, which like he did was Bodied and Detention, I believe.
And Detention, yes.
Yeah. I hear about Joseph Kahn. You guys are in LA, right? So I don't know if you know him, so I don't want to. He does a lot of commercials.
Well, we did have a project which was set up by someone we were working with at the time, who was working with Joseph Kahn. So
with Joseph Kahn, and I do know his Detention co-writer Mark Palermo, but I do not know Joseph.
Joseph is really interesting in that, like, everyone who knows him says he just wants to direct Marvel movies. Like, that's all he wants to do.
I get
he
it.
wanted Power Rangers, right? I remember.
Yeah,
I remember Power Rangers. He wanted that hardcore.
He really
he
wanted
made that
hard.
Short film. Yeah,
but he's just too weird, and like people are like, no. Which is so funny that he directs like Taylor Swift, every like gigantic star.
Right,
he does those movies. It's like the way that the Wachowskis have kind of embraced that, like, well, we don't need to be like the big hit. We don't need to be the and like Kahn seems to have been chasing that, even though he has it. He has it in his music videos, commercials, all that stuff. But yeah, I'll see his next. I love Bodied. I don't know if you guys have seen that one.
I haven't. I purchased it on digital because I love Detention. It was the next thing he did after Detention that was a movie. So I was like, okay, fuck it, I'm buying this. So I bought it. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm excited to.
It should have been huge, and then he sold it to YouTube Red.
Right.
Yeah, that's what happened. That's why I got like buried. Yeah.
I saw Torque recently for the first time. So.
Oh yeah, I like Torque. Torque is a lot. But it's very fun.
Torque is a lot. It's fun.
I mean, I made a thread on Twitter of like every reflection in the movie. It's like 30 shots of like people being reflected in a knife or a mirror. Or
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, Torque, you can see the studio and him at war, like all throughout the movie, like, the bipolarness of that movie where it's like, it's just another Fast and the Furious movie. No, it's fucking weird. It's just another Fast and the Furious movie. So, yeah, but anyway, all right. I think that's going to wrap up our discussion on the movie itself. But
actually, hold on. Before we wrap up, actually, Dave, before we wrap up, Justin, I'm curious. Mm-hmm. Speed Racer 2. Do you have ideas?
Do I have ideas for Speed Racer 2? Like, Kowski for some reason came back, or is this like one of those universal like?
Hey, You're the guy. You
Someone
decide.
comes to me and are like, "Oh, we want you to direct Speed Racer 2. Here's a room with some green screens. You have 2 weeks. Go at it." I would make it. I can't cast Emil Hirsch in the movie for
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
But it would be like a broken down.
Wait.
like
What's wrong
racer?
with Emil Hirsch? Is he off the list? What did he do? What did
Yeah,
he do?
he strangled a woman at a film
Okay.
festival
Oops.
while
Oopsie.
drunk.
All right, go on.
Yes,
Yeah.
Oopsie.
that happened a while back.
Yeah.
All right, go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. He said, like, tweeting, like, I would love to do Speed Racer 2. And it's like, buddy.
God,
Buddy,
oh,
right.
God.
Yeah, so I would make it about like a broken down racer who never won anything,
Mhm.
but suddenly gets a chance again to like participate in a race, and he's supposed to lose, but he's put together with a team of people who were always at the back, but now putting themselves together can do the skills that they need to maybe win the race, which
I like it.
they're basically maybe like a Rocky situation
Uh-huh.
where it's
Right.
like, oh, we're going to put you up against like this big
Pure
race
underdog, yeah.
and you know what? They would lose in the race, but they would win in their own way. That's what I would do. Yeah.
Damn right.
So literally like Rocky, right?
You literally like Rocky, yeah. You know, if you use a template of something, like how can you make a movie where like the person loses, but it still has value and it doesn't feel like you know, wasting their life or something like that. So
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Maybe they bet against the stock or something like that. Like
that's
it's a reverse Speed Racer. Where...
Well, it's interesting. I'm even thinking of like the Cars movies, and it's always the guy who's already on top having to come back on top, rather than the underdog actually
boring.
Winning.
Yeah,
it is.
It's the idea of like, can you find value in the art of racing or whatever art you may be doing? And feel satisfied by that and feel like your life is fulfilled. So that would be my Speed Racer 2.
Oh my God. See, now there's a story that the Wachowskis should tell, because it's like they constantly get denied by the mainstream public. And their hits keep getting denied to be hits, but they keep making it their way. And they plainly find plenty of value in that because they keep coming back for more.
Do you guys like Cloud Atlas?
I haven't seen it.
Oh,
I
don't like it very much. And I want to like it a lot.
Like,
I enjoyed the world
it was co-directed by Tom Twyker.
For sure.
Yeah.
The world building is top notch. It just felt like 3 episodes of something that
there's a trailer that's like 6 minutes long that came out before the movie came out. I think that trailer is better than the movie because it does things the movie doesn't do, which is like intercut the stories like in little 20-second. And that's another film where it's like, oh, the white actors are in yellowface. Say,
oh no. See, I never watched Cloud Atlas because I hated the novel to begin with.
Oh,
so
really?
I never liked
the novel. Is weird. I'm not weird. It's just, it's not satisfying.
It's so I kind of, and I was also again kind of on. I think I had seen Speed Racer by then, but the Wachowskis were not I like them much better now than I did then. I think. I have tried Jupiter Ascending twice.
I do not like Jupiter Ascending. That's a weird misfire for me.
Yes,
it's almost painful.
That's interesting. I was going to ask.
It's almost painful to watch.
And
I hope someone.
One of the big issues with that movie is like Chan Tam Tam, which is what me and my friends like to call Channing Tatum. He's in like Channing Tatum for a while had like 2 modes where it's like kind of boring step up mode. And like charismatic, like fun dumb guy mode and Magic Mike and 21 Jump Street. And they got boring step up mode in Jupiter Ascending. So it's very weird.
Yes. I hope someone picks that for this show. I really want to be forced to finish it and like have a conversation about it, because that is the one of their movies or their work, their output. I totally agree. I've not been able to force myself to finish it. And I feel like because how badly people misjudge Speed Racer, I almost feel like
you hope that like,
am I misjudging this one?
Yeah,
or I'm afraid I'm that asshole who's like just dismissing it out of hand. And the Wachowskis still stand by it. They're like, we were trying lots of really interesting things. They swear by that one too.
I watch it every 5 years, and I'm like, maybe this is the time. And I'm like, no, it's the same movie I watch. I'm like, I love Speed Racer so much, and I like the other stuff that they did so much. Why Jupiter Ascending? And it ends in an interesting way, which is like kind of like, oh, you are the queen, you've been so chosen. And the character's like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to go back to my normal life. And then she does. And that's an interesting thing that the movie doesn't feel like it earns at the end of the film, unfortunately.
Well, one day I'll watch the whole thing through. For some
you
reason,
watch all of
even if no one
Sense8,
picked
right?
up the
And you
show.
said you really like that.
Yes, I love it. I mean, I wish it wasn't. I like that they made the movie to wrap it all up. I'm glad it has an ending. Obviously, that was not the ideal way to wrap the whole thing up. But outside of that, I do really appreciate everything that they were doing with Sense8. Yeah.
Sense8 caught me for the first couple of episodes, and then I was like, okay, all right.
It's very slow paced, I find.
Yeah,
I haven't
very
finished
slow.
it. Yeah.
Very slow burn. Yeah. I agree with that. I can't fight that, but I enjoyed the slow. Now, I mean, you can't binge it. I would say anyone who likes to binge things, it is not a binge. It's like Twin Peaks. You need to watch an episode, go do something in life, come back, watch another episode, and slowly let it come together. Like, make it pretend that they're only releasing an episode a week and only watch it that way. And it's brilliant. It's wonderful. But if you try to just like cram it all in, I do think it's like it is stretched out. It's stretched thin. All right. So we are at the point where we, of course, want to pair some wines and maybe some not wines with this movie. So, Justin, you are our special guest. I know you probably have a not wine to pair with this movie, but what do you like to drink with Speed Racer?
Well, with Speed Racer, clearly you want something fruity, right? And I mean, the movie's all about sugar. Like, there's tons of sugar.
Yes.
I don't consume sugar anymore. But I think maybe Speed Racer, that's the way they would want to go about it as well. Okay. So I'm actually having a Remedy kombucha, no sugar, raspberry lemonade. So I feel like that's in the vibe of Speed Racer. Now, something rainbow related would probably be Speed Racer. But and do you guys drink kombucha at all?
Oh yeah,
Alice does.
Actually, I make my own. We make our own.
Yes, what flavors do you go with?
Oh, I honestly, we go blind. We sort of close our eyes at the juice aisle and pick.
No, really? Yeah. What have been some of your favorites that you've done?
Honestly, the ginger echinacea. It was crazy. It was. Honestly, it felt like an actual alcoholic cocktail, which is kind of how we use it, like to sort of offset actual alcohol consumption. Alcohol's kind of built in the day. You reach for a drink after a hard day, and in order to offset that, we started playing around with the kombucha and the ginger echinacea. It feels like a cocktail. It actually satisfies.
So you don't play with like fruity kombuchas at all?
Oh yeah, I do. I love a dark cherry. Love a dark cherry. Love a dark cherry. There was this juice that was called bubblegum juice, and I think it's made from the cotton candy grapes.
Okay, so I only had some of those cotton candy grapes recently, and it feels like a horrific science thing that should not exist. Yes. You're like, this literally tastes like cotton candy.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Like this has to be cancer.
My wife ate it, and she's like, oh, it tastes so good. And I was like, oh, you're not getting more cotton candy grapes? She's like, no, I don't like it. Tastes too sugary when you eat it.
Right.
Like this is artificial.
You only need a grape.
So what do you guys drink?
All right, cool.
Dave.
So, so for me, I 100% agree with you. This needed to be fruity, fruit forward, as they say in the wine world. And I also thought, this is a newfangled movie, especially, I mean, even today, this movie is doing shit.
Are you experimenting with your wine?
Ooh. No, not exactly.
Okay.
But I knew I wanted this to be new world versus old world. So you couldn't go for the stodgy European wines. As amazing as they are, they have been the same for hundreds of years. And they make them that way. Change is hard over there. So I was like, okay, as delicious as they can be. And also old world wines tend not to be fruit forward. They turn their nose up at that. They're like, everything's got to be earthy and mineral and herbaceousness and mushroom and blah, 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 blah. So I was like, okay, hell no. We're going to go. This needed to be hedonistic. This needed to be an assault on your senses, which is, I believe, what the Wachowskis call a lot of their work is like, it's an assault on your senses. They love the word assault. So I'm like, something big, bold, fruit forward, juicy. And I picked, this is a wine. This is one of my favorite Santa Barbara wineries here in California. It is, I'm going to put it on screen for everyone. The listeners can't see this, but it is Equipo, Aquipo, which is Spanish for team. And this is a red blend that the workers at the winery get to pick the blend every year.
Interesting.
And they get to put it together. So that's why it's called Team, because this is the team's wine. This was their preferred.
That's perfect for Speed Racer too.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, motherfucker. And this is my favorite. Grassini is one of my favorite wineries there. They make, so Santa Barbara is known in California to be one of the few AVAs, the by law recognized viticultural areas that produce what Europeans like to call terroir. In California, we make wines however the fuck we want. So you can go to like Napa, Santa Barbara, Paso, and a lot of the times, all the wines, winery to winery, they can taste pretty differently, demonstrably different between them. Santa Barbara is a place where it's hard to make wine taste different. Like for whatever reason, they're near the shore, the maritime climate, the soil, something about it. A lot of the wines really do have an identity. And they are like, it's locked in. If you go to Santa Barbara, when I was first getting started in wine, I didn't understand that's how wine worked. And I was very disappointed they all tasted the same, because I was like, I wanted to hopscotch around these wineries and actually get a wide array of flavors. But Grassini is one of the places that I don't know what they do, but they taste different than other Santa Barbara wines. And I love that.
Like,
so
how
they
is
are
it
denser
different compared? Oh, yeah.
It is more like a Napa wine. Even though we're much further south, much cooler climate because it's right near the shore. And it's always fruity, dense, chewy. The tannins, this is a 2017. I still had a bottle of this. They're on like their 2021 now. So you can't get this in 2017 anymore. But this had age on it. So like, even then though, the tannins were still like, it had some rough edges to it, which I like. And if you drink this younger, it'll have even rougher edges on it. But at the same time, Santa Barbara wines are known to be lighter in body, lighter in color, more acidic, not as fruit forward. It's not as punchy in the mouth, just dark, dense, crazy fruit. This motherfucker is. And the other thing that I love about this, not just that it's called Team and it's the Team's blend, it's different every year, but this blend in particular, the 2017, it's 98% Cabernet Sauvignon. So almost entirely one thing. And then it's 1% Petit Verdot and 1% Merlot, just to balance it out in this time. So it is like
small percentages.
Small percentages. So what I liked about that, though, is, the Wachowskis are all about identity and being true to yourself. And I'm like, this is what it is. It allows its team, those little 1%, to influence them in very small ways. It balances them. It probably is. They put them in there for a reason. I don't know what that reason is. I didn't make the blend, but like, they decided it's even better if it had just this little bit of Petit Verdot and this tiny, tiny bit of Merlot. And that is being true to yourself. You are still a Cabernet Sauvignon, but you also are allowing those helping you out to actually influence you in small ways while still being true to yourself. I liked everything metaphorically about this wine for something like Speed Racer and creators like the Wachowskis. And then flavor-wise, this is all like dark plum, blackberry. You've got tobacco, new leather. I mean, all these just intense, juicy, and then chewy flavors that are, and all the big flavors, that tobacco, that leather, the plum, the blackberry. It is just one of the most delicious wines. This is one of my favorite wines in California. And Equipo, or Equipo, I believe is how you pronounce it, but it might be Equipo. It's spelled Equipo if you're an English speaker. And at Grassini Winery in Santa Barbara, they have a website. You can order from them. They're a small winery, so I don't think you're going to find it in a grocery store. The Equipo is probably around 35, I would say.
All right, say Equipo.
Equipo.
Okay.
Equipo is around 35.
Okay.
So that is my pairing for Speed Racer. Dallas, what you got?
Nice. That's a good one. Actually, I've definitely not tried that one. I may have to find a bottle of that. All right.
I got more when you're back in LA.
All right, sweet. Nice rubbing it in there. Anyway,
I don't know where Dallas is. I just see a bare wall behind him. I assume
that's right. I like to move in secrecy. Anyway, so my experience of this wine, if I had to relate it, and I do this sometimes, relate it to a culinary experience, for me, this is like walking into a great little sort of tapas restaurant a tapas bar, and where the menu, the offerings are curated. And if you don't know anything about tapas, you get little bites. It just basically means little bites, little like really decadent bites. You get one bite that's really satisfying, that either forces you to take a drink, compels you to take a drink, to cut the acidity, to cut the fat, to cut the sugar. So you get cheeses, you get nice rendered what's the word? Mature fruits. You get deli meat. You get just sort of great stuff, just great stuff. And that's what this film feels like to me, because it is this sort of curation, and it is heavily curated, of seemingly disparate kind of elements and things, like the style they use to sort of render this film. It's so kinetic, but at the core of this is just the story of this little kid chasing his brother's ghost, and that it's so schmaltzy and so sweet. That's what annoyed me about it. It was like, okay, they really made me care about this nonsense, and something my brain is I never care about this sort of stories.
And don't want to care.
Can't give myself over to care.
Okay, Dr. Phil and Oprah. But it just comes together so seamlessly, and because of that, I'm drawn to when I go to tapas restaurants. That's also how I like to eat. I'm not a big meal guy. I like to pick, and by the end of it, have there's just completely sated, all of my sort of appetites: the sweet, the salty, the umami, and that's what this film is to me. It really just came together to satisfy just about every appetite in terms of a cinematic experience. And so when I think of wines pairing with those experiences, I rarely ever go to a red. Because for me, reds really, they're too
intense.
They're too
heavy.
They're too, yeah, those will work. We'll go with those. They're too heavy. They're too, they have too much personality sometimes for some of the dishes. And because of that, because the dominant thing here is a sweet and smalty kind of thing, I decided I wanted something that would cut that sweetness. And for me, those are going to be your mid whites, right? Generally a white that has been tested by time, that is the go-to white for a particular region. Sometimes they're going to have pretty intense minerality depending on where they are. The ones you find based on this grape in California have really high minerality. The ones you find in this particular wine's native region of Spain, the minerality is kind of mid-level. So I wanted something green and kind of flinty that would stand up to the schmaltz and to the meat, and to the, all the stuff.
You needed to counteract
everything the movie counter,
was.
But I also needed a counter, but I also needed sort of a baseline, because things are just sort of all over the place in this film sometimes, but they do come together seamlessly. I will say that. So I actually went with an Albarino. And this particular Albarino is kind of a small batch. It's very popular. It's from the Rías Baixas region of Spain. It's so drinkable. It's so quaffable. It's just so satisfying, and it opens up on the glass. Sometimes, the first taste, you get a lot of that minerality, but by the end, you're getting the peach and some of the pineapple, and they can be, the notes can be really, really sort of aromatic. So I went with this Liarana Albarino from, like I said, the Rías Baixas region. It is kind of fantastic. This is a 2018, which is about $52 a bottle, but they also have a 2018, which is, I think, price point. Yeah, it's kind of lovely. But they also have a 24 and an 18. Which are also fantastic.
And say the name of the bottle one more time.
Oh, it's Liarana, Leirana, It's an Albarino for those who are interested. Yeah, kind of fantastic. I don't get sick and tired of it. For me, I'm over a red after a glass or two. I could probably go through, if I'm at a tapas place, I'm probably going to go back for 5 or 6 glasses of this, depending how long I'm there, and not get tired of it. And I think that's, how I kind of tucked into this film. I never tired of this film. So yeah, that's my go-to.
Beautiful. All right. So 2 completely different ways to go about it. Either I think I leaned into what the film was and just tried to match it in the wine, and Dallas wanted that.
Was like, no, I need to. I gotta calm myself. I don't want to be
calm down. Calm down.
I need a counterpoint.
Yeah.
Right. Something austere and emotionless. Damn it.
Yeah.
That's what I want to be sipping here. And then with Justin,
well, I'm like, just give me something fruity, please.
Fruity. But you know what? I didn't comment on this before, but raspberry and lemonade, I do think those are 2 great flavors for something like Speed Racer, because you've got the acidity, the tartness, the bite with the sweetness of something like lemonade and raspberry. Like those are
lemonade
sweet.
Says like summer, like bright colors, like
fun.
Right.
Yeah.
If you went with like cherry, it's like no, that's not quite there, or even like
cherry's a little adult. Cherry's a little adult for it.
Yeah. This is what you drink if you were sitting in the bleachers watching a race, right? It's lemonade and things like that. Yeah, 100%. All right, guys, this has been Wine and. Once again, I am Dave Baxter. With me is my co-host Dallas Miller.
Dallas Miller, and we rock. You rock, and we hope you enjoy this new iteration of what we're doing, because I've had too much to drink and I'm rambling, and I'm glad happy to have met Justin, and he seems like cool people, and we'll probably cut this part out of the podcast. So yeah.
No, it's staying in. It's staying in. I'm going to keep staying in as we go on.
Keep on rambling. And once again, this has been Justin Decloux. Justin, what are you up to right now, and where can people find you?
People can find me. I have multiple podcasts. Probably the one most people know me from is the Important Cinema Club, where every week we do a new filmmaker and we discuss them. And it's meant as like an introductory thing. So like, if you don't know who the filmmaker is, that's the point. We're hoping to like point you in the right direction. As you mentioned, Dave, the Very Fine Comic Book Podcast, where me and my pal Mike Wood go over a new comic subject every week, and no such thing as a bad movie, where the gimmick is we pick a bad movie and we each all have to say one thing we liked about it.
One thing
before the end of the episode. Sometimes it happens at the last minute, and we're like, we have to say one thing we liked about this.
So you're doing 3 podcasts?
I have 4 podcasts.
4.
I have one of them is called the Bay Street Video Podcast, where I do it with a guy who's the product manager at a literal brick and mortar video store in Toronto.
Nice.
We just go through. We each pick like new releases that are being sold or rented. And we just talk about them. So
very cool.
This is all tax scheme, so I can write this stuff off of my tax.
I hear you, buddy.
Blu-rays in the background.
I hear you. Cool. All right, guys.
All right. We will catch you next time. Once again, please subscribe if you liked what you heard. Rate and follow us, and we will catch you next time. There will be links down below for everybody and everything, so please check that out. And we will
feel free to fact check anything we say, because half of it is wine-induced rambling.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
When you spotted something we got wrong, you just hold it on the inside, and
you
go,
keep it to
I'm right, and they're wrong. And you know what?
Exactly.
You karmically feel it. You don't need to write or say anything like
that. That's right. All right, guys.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course.
All right. Ciao for now, everybody.
Ciao.